Guys, this is an exciting one for me today. I'm just going to tell a little bit of my own backstory here. I don't want to be too self-indulgent, but I also want to give context for people that are watching this, and also for the amazing two blokes that I'm interviewing today. So, I went vegan first of all in 2006, so a long time ago, and that was, an animal rights sort of. That was the motivation for me at that point in time, and it had been a few years in the making that like lots of people, I had this idea of going vegan before I even heard the word vegan. I didn't even know what it was. But being an athlete myself, a former junior, I represented Australia in marathon kayaking, and I had this idea that most people do, that I can't stop eating animals. I didn't know the word vegan, but I can't stop eating animals because I need my protein and all that sort of stuff. So it took me a couple of years to actually get around to trying it. And then when I did try it, I still had not met any vegans. I didn't know what the word was, and yeah, there was one particular guy that showed me that it was actually possible, and I managed to find this guy, and his name was Robert Cheek. He's he was one of the OGs for me. So this is a big deal. And then shortly after that, or maybe it was a few years. Like, I'm not exactly sure of the timeline, but along the line as well, being this guy, that former athlete, wannabe future athlete, all that sort of stuff, and wanting to show people that it was possible to be an athlete without eating animals. I came across this other guy who had this website called No Meat Athlete, and that was pretty cool for me as well, to be able to engage with that all those years ago. And that was Matt Fraser. So this is sort of a little bit of a fanboy experience for me, getting to getting to talk to a couple of my OGs, and really excited about this. So welcome to SpudFit, Robert Cheek and Matt Fraser.
Thank you so much. Great to be
Yeah,
here.
thanks a lot. Appreciate it, Andrew.
No worries. So Matt, what help me out with the timeline here. When did you start No Meat Athlete? When would I have been engaging with you? Because I'm pretty sure it was in, maybe in the first 6 months of you starting that blog was when I first found you.
Really? That makes you an OG in my book. That's you're I mean, there aren't many people except for my mom and a couple of others who were reading back then. That was 2009. And then I feel like it kind of like started to actually gain a decent sized following around 2010, 2011. That's when it kind of blew up a little bit.
Yeah, right. Well, there you go. That makes sense to me that it was around that time. So yeah, there you go. It's been a long time since I've been following you both. So yeah, we can one at a time, I guess, but maybe we'll start with Robert, since he was the first of you two that I engaged with. So can you tell us a little bit about how you came to veganism?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. First of all, thanks for that story. Thanks for the intro. So glad to play some sort of role in your vegan journey, and it's just really cool too that like Matt and I both played a role because as co-authors of the Plant-Based Athlete, we hear that a lot, like because we're both kind of those old school people who were doing the endurance and the strength, and I'm glad that it had an impact on you.
Awesome. I have
And
to interrupt you for a second. I've just realized I think it's really appropriate that you've got a goat on the wall behind you, because in my eyes, you're one of the goats.
I just moved to this room like literally 5 minutes before this. I'm like still sweating from carrying my setup from the basement to upstairs. But thank you, thank you for the goat reference. That's the very first one because of this new setup. It was not intentional. That's actually a rescued farm animal from Farm Sanctuary, a photo by Cameron Osteen, who worked at Farm Sanctuary and has actually a photo book of rescued animals. So shout out to Cameron Osteen. But Andrew, like you, I came to this for animal rights. I got into veganism back in the 1990s, before the internet, or at least before the public internet came around, and before I had it, certainly in 1995. And I grew up on a farm, and I just got to a point where I didn't want to consume animals anymore. I didn't want to contribute to animal suffering, animal cruelty. But I was a 5-sport athlete. I was a runner, I was a soccer player, basketball player, a wrestler, I was in track and field, and I wanted to get bigger and stronger. And that was meaningful to me. I really did. And I wondered, can I do this without consuming animals? Can I do this on a plant-based diet? And the only way to find out was to put it to the test. And so I did. I adopted a plant-based diet, vegan lifestyle in 1995. for ethical reasons. I continued on with my 5-sport athlete career, finished up high school, ran cross country in college, and then I got inspired to start lifting weights. And that's what jump-started my whole bodybuilding career. I didn't even know what bodybuilding was until my friend Jordan Baskerville introduced me to that sport. He's still one of my absolute best friends today. And I just embraced bodybuilding. And I eventually took myself from weighing 120 pounds to 220 pounds and won multiple bodybuilding competitions, wrote a number of different books on the topic, started veganbodybuilding.com in February of 2003. And here I am a quarter century later doing my thing, and co-authored The Plant-Based Athlete, which is one of the things we're talking about today. And it's just a really, really exciting 25-year journey, and happy to be on this journey with both of you guys.
Yeah, that's great, and of course, you know, your story has impacted a lot of people like myself, as I explained, and you know, I think it's testament to your creative powers and energy to keep producing amazing content and keep pushing yourself physically over the years, and yeah, it's a real you know, it's your evidence that this works if ever there was evidence for that. So. Thanks for sharing that. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about how you arrived at this point too?
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up, you know, eating standard American diet. Never really talked about being vegan or vegetarian or anything like that. Really, also wasn't. I was an athlete, but not any different than any other kid. Like I wasn't into endurance or anything. And then in college, I started getting into just fitness in general. Ran a marathon kind of stupidly with friends. We just like decided we're going to run a marathon, and it didn't work out very well. We missed our goal time by 100 minutes because we didn't know anything about it. We said, we'll qualify for the Boston Marathon. And it turns out that was very, very unrealistic target for the first marathon. So missing it by that much made me say, I just got really excited actually about the idea of like, what if I could actually qualify for that? Like what kind of fitness and discipline would I need to have to do that? And so I spent the next 7 years, I think, maybe it was 6, working on that goal. And when I was about 10 minutes shy of it, I got this really what I viewed as a very inconvenient ethical urge to become vegetarian at that time. Like you, I didn't know the word vegan. I didn't even know that there was a step beyond vegetarian. And I started looking around. I just felt like I had to do it. I was worried about the protein thing, of course, and how it would impact this goal that I was really getting close to. But had kind of plateaued a little bit. So I said, you know, I'm just going to do this thing. I don't know if I'm going to get there anyway. So why not just go vegetarian, see how it goes? And as I was looking around for information, I managed not to see Robert's site, but I guess that's not a coincidence because he was writing more about, or his audience and his forums was much more about bodybuilding. And I couldn't find anything about endurance running, you know, eating a vegetarian diet. There were a few little things about it, little like kind of anecdotal studies, or not studies, but like mentions of people who had made it work. But there was nothing that was friendly and welcoming and non-preachy is what I kind of was looking for. And so I said, well, I'll just start documenting what I'm doing. And I don't know if it's going to work, but like if somehow this all works out for me, it'd be really cool to have written some stuff that would help people do it in this way that I think would resonate with me if I were the one reading it. So I started my blog just as kind of a journal, and then much to my surprise, it worked exceedingly well for the running. Just 6 months after I made that change, I took those final 10 minutes off my marathon, which at that point was a lot because I really had like I think my previous 2 marathons, I might have improved by like 2 minutes each time. And so like I finally got in and just kind of at that point had started to know about people like Robert, people like Brendan Brazier, people like Scott Jurek. And I realized not only was this possible, that there were a lot of people who I mean, really, even back then, it seemed to me like there were a decent number who were making vegetarian, or now I knew this new word, vegan diets work. And I started to get excited about that. And I was like, wow, I could actually go further with this and potentially actually get more benefits for my training. Even though that wasn't my point of doing it, I suddenly discovered that like, wow, there were people who thought this actually worked better than a regular diet. So I gradually went vegan over the course of like another year and a half. And then I got into ultra running. I did several 50 milers and I did a 100 miler. And really just during that time was shocked by how the injuries just really stopped happening. Like, and I was running mileage that I could not dream of running before, especially when I ran my 100 miler, because that just required like running a 50 miler and a 50K within, I think, probably 2 months of the race. when previously, if I tried to run 2 marathons in 3 months, I would a definite injury. So it just all worked out. No Meat Athlete kind of took off, as I said. Started writing some books about it, started doing some speaking, started a podcast, and all this stuff. And then, I guess 7, 8 more years went by, started a supplement company and some other things, but kind of just kept doing what made No Meat Athlete successful from the beginning, which was presenting all this information in like a really welcoming way, trying as much as possible to root what I was saying in science and not make crazy claims. And I really did never try to push it on anybody and say like, you have to do this or you should do this. I just said, this works really well for a lot of people, including me. And if you're interested, here are a bunch of tools and tips that have worked. And that's kind of the story of No Meat Athlete.
Yeah, thank you. And I always enjoyed your writing style and exactly what you described about, you try to keep it evidence-based and not judgmental and not pushy. And, that's sort of the approach that I try to take as well. And I think Robert tries to take as well. So I really enjoy that about both of you guys. So obviously you guys are coming from pretty different backgrounds athletically. How does it come about that a bodybuilder and an endurance runner end up working together?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. First of all, I think there's some sort of mutual admiration and respect that we share. Hopefully, Matt could be shaking his head right now. I'm not sure because I'm looking into the camera instead. But I think that's where it starts. It starts with understanding that to make a meaningful impact on a movement is difficult, and to believe in something is difficult, and to believe in yourself is difficult, and to inspire lots and lots of people is difficult. It's all rewarding and it's fulfilling and it's fun work, but it's not easy to do. And to see what Matt was able to do with No Meat Athlete and impact so many people and inspire so many people and create some sort of actual movement and shift in the way that people view food and view exercise and identify with maybe their relationship with food and how they see themselves and their place in the world. This is something that I've actually wanted to work with Matt for a while on something big. And this opportunity, the Plant-Based Athlete, was that opportunity for us to collaborate and make something really, really special. And so as far as there is a backstory. Obviously, we met on tour, I think 10 years ago or something. I was on a speaking tour. I'm from the West Coast of the US, Matt's from the East Coast. I was out East doing some speaking. Matt attended one of those presentations. We later met up at was that a Ethiopian restaurant in Baltimore or something? I have the photos.
Oh yeah. I thought that was so cool because you texted me or emailed or something, said, hey, come. And I was like, man, I get to go actually have lunch or something with this. To me, you were like a celebrity then. I was like, man, I get to go do this stuff. And I think you were giving away all this extra stuff you had in your car. And I got a shirt and I was like, man, I got this guy's shirt and he's like a famous, I don't know. I thought it was so cool.
Yeah, I still have those photos. I just came across them just recently. There were 8 or 10 of us at a table and in I think it was an Ethiopian restaurant in Baltimore.
Yeah, or a soul food kind of place or something like that.
Yeah. Some sort of soul food kind of place. And then
what's that, Andrew? I was just going to say, I felt the same way, Matt. Look, I should have said it in the intro that me and Robert have actually met before. Robert did a tour of Australia a number of years ago and ran a training session in a park in Sydney, and I was lucky to be able to come and attend that, and I felt exactly the same, like I was meeting some kind of rock star. That was that was really cool. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that from both of you. I was out in the sun a lot today, but you're making me blush, so it's not just my sunburn. But that's really, that's part of the history, and it's those kind of things. I put myself on tour for 15 years and I met people like Matt. I met people like you, Andrew. I met people all along the way. And there were certain people I met who I wanted to work with. I worked with Mindy Collette on my book, Shredded. I worked with Vanessa Espinoza on my book, Plant-Based Muscle. I worked with Julia Abbott on vegan bodybuilding and fitness, and doing this, the biggest project that I've ever done. That's it. The Plant-Based Athlete, this book is completely mainstream. It's designed to be for everybody, the unequivocal leader in the how to be a plant-based athlete book that has interviews with dozens and dozens of world-class athletes and scientific studies and references and tons of doctors and nutritionists and dietitians endorsing it. Matt's the perfect co-author for this. So we've known each other for 10 years. I've known his kids since they were born, basically. Know his family. Matt and I often meet up every year for this holistic holiday at sea vegan cruise out in the Caribbean. There's almost 2,000 of us out there on a vegan cruise with Dr. Campbell and Esselstyn and Gregor and Brenda Davis and all these wonderful speakers. And Matt and I are there speaking as well. And I'm doing fitness classes. And his son comes and attends my fitness classes and you know, rocks the whole show. And he's a great athlete. And we have a good time. And so that's really how this came about. And think about this, Andrew, the balance of a vegan bodybuilding community of almost 20 years meets an endurance community, a vegan endurance community that's even bigger than the vegan bodybuilding community. You cover so much ground there. And the fact that I've been doing a lot of speaking for 15 years and Matt's been doing a lot of blogging for 10 years. And we cover so many different forms of media, of touring, of the collaborations, the people that we know, the doctors, the athletes, the experts, the opportunities to talk to people like you. And we knew this could be something really special. And from what we've seen so far, I know you're out on the other side of the world, but here in the US, The Plant-Based Athlete is one of the best-selling books in America right now. You know, the top 3, 4, 500 of all books and #1 in multiple categories, best-selling vegan diet book around. So it looks like it worked, you know, and really, really honored to do this with Matt, and especially excited to see what happens when it's actually on store shelves in a few days.
Yeah. You guys are killing it at the moment, and I was lucky to get a little copy by PDF, and I've got the full paperback version on the way. But one thing that I was really impressed about is that you know, I've read lots of vegan books and diet related books, going right back to I think it was called Thrive by Brendan Brazier. That was one of the first ones I read, and then I read I've read both of your books as well. But this book is like most of the books that you read are sort of a similar premise. You know, it's you know, Robert puts Robert's take on veganism and training, and Matt puts Matt's take on it, but you know, they're sort of coming from the same angle. Most books tend to have the same angle, just from, you know, a different person's point of view. But this book is really, really different. So, and it's a really cool idea. So can you tell us a little bit about how this idea for the book came to be, where it came from, and how that process was?
Yeah, what you're describing is exactly what made me want to do the book when Robert brought the idea to me and said, hey, I have an idea for a book that I'd really like to work with you on. Because I kind of thought I was done writing books. I had written my book, No Meat Athlete, which, as you said, was just like my take on it. And then I written a cookbook called the No Meat Athlete Cookbook. And like, you know, I enjoyed publishing books and everything, but I just felt like I didn't really have more to say. Like, I had said my philosophy. I hadn't really grown that much since then as an athlete, or my nutrition philosophy hadn't changed much since the cookbook. So I was like, what else am I going to do? Like, I figured like that was time to hang up the keyboard, I guess, as far as writing books goes. But then Robert came to me with this idea, and he said, like, what if we wrote a book that was not either of our stories? Because we've both done that a couple times now, and every other plant-based person, this was 2018, I guess, maybe 19, you know, and there were maybe a dozen or 15 other people who had like written their version of a plant-based fitness story and diet. And like you said, it was kind of all the same. Everyone might have had a different kind of way of doing it that was their little idiosyncratic, you know, favorite foods and things and their philosophy, but it was just one person telling their story. And, you know, like I said in the beginning, like, I don't get that excited when I see these anecdotal, like, this worked for one person. It's cool. You can get inspired by it. But it's not enough to like really move the needle and like push the movement forward and put it into a broader, more scientific context. So when Robert said, like, let's make a book that is not about us, but it's about all the other athletes, actually athletes way better than both of us, who are at the top of their sports, Olympians, pros, real elite athletes. And like, let's find out what they're doing. And then let's present all that. Let's see how it shakes out after we interview all of them. And then let's boil it down to the concepts, which you and I both, you know, Robert and I both knew that there would certain concepts would come out. We knew nutrient density versus calorie density, that would of course be a common theme. We knew that whole foods versus processed foods was going to come out. But we didn't know what everybody's stance on protein, carbohydrate, fat, macronutrient balance would be. We didn't know, you know, how much of the vegan junk foods athletes would be eating. We didn't know any of these things just yet. So that sounded like a fun project to do. And to me, one that our movement at that point was still really, really missing. So I think this is filling a hole that has been here, and that I think is really necessary for this fitness movement to be taken more seriously. It's getting there for sure as more and more pros start to do it and people start to notice. But I think, and the Game Changers obviously came out and like that moved things forward a whole lot. But I think this is playing a role that nothing has really done yet. And yeah, that's why I was so excited to do it with Robert. By the way, also, like, Robert didn't mention this, but he's a great runner. I wouldn't say I'm by any means a great bodybuilder, but like I came to fitness going to the gym in college, trying to get big, trying to bench my weight and a half. That was my goal for forever, and I finally did it.
Wow, that's
So I
good.
got, yeah. I mean, I was strong back when I was focused on that until I started running, and then started withering away to nothing. But anyway, every now and then, every few years, I'll like get inspired to put back on that weight. And so anyway, I think we both just sort of have this mutual appreciation for both sports, and those sports kind of cover, there are a lot of things in between those two sports that aren't all endurance and aren't all strength. So I think it just made it sort of very natural fit, and both of us have these broad perspectives. And yeah, I'm so pleased with the result, how well it turned out. It really is a fantastic book. I know it's my book, but I really, as I read the final copy, like seeing it all in that form, I was just so pleased with how well it had turned out, and just what a difference I think it's going to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll make a huge difference, and like I said, it's a unique idea, and it's a being able to bring all these different stories of all these different athletes together and show that, obviously you guys have demonstrated that this is good for endurance and this is good for bodybuilding, but there's a lot more to the athletic world than just endurance and bodybuilding. There's so there's so many different ways for this to work, and you briefly mentioned the common themes in the book. So there's, when we talk about diet, there's just so many, there's even more ideas about what's a good diet. And even within the vegan plant-based world, some people eat junk food, and some people want to focus on fats more, and protein more, or carbohydrates more, or you mentioned nutrient density, calorie density, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm curious, you've spoken with a lot of athletes for this book. I'm curious to hear what you think are the common themes. What is, we can learn a lot by finding out what all these different athletes have in common. So what did you learn from putting this book together?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. And I want to start by adding one more thing to what Matt said. In addition to telling all these stories, we really wanted this to be evidence-based as well. We got Dr. Michael Greger from nutritionfacts.org to write the foreword, and his whole thing is evidence-based nutrition. Like, that is his theme. And Matt's always been, like he already said, he's always been kind of siding on the side of science and the data and the research and the studies, and just not wanting to make, claims that are too far exaggerated or too far outside of, the realistic possibility for most people, but just stick to what the science says. And that's something that we really wanted to do. And yes, we have, and I'm going to mention these themes in a moment. Yes, we have 50, 60 different anecdotal first-person accounts, stories from plant-based athletes who have been some of the best in the world. And because of their achievements are so dramatic, it's worth considering those. Like, that's valuable. If you're the best in the world at something, your opinion matters because you've been so successful, and the audiences deserve to hear from you. But we also, with all those anecdotal stories, including mine, including Matt's, including these great athletes like James Wilkes and Rich Roll and Scott Jurek and Brendan Brazier and Fiona Oakes, James Newberry, and all these people, we also wanted the science in there. And so there's more scientific study references than I've had in, probably all my other books combined, because this is just a different level of, I almost want to say, maturity and I don't know, maybe not professionalism, but maturity, professionalism, and just this coming into its own. Like, this is the really what Matt and I have almost kind of joked, like the grown-up version of what the plant-based fitness world has been looking for, a real professional book that all the experts have gotten behind. So I did want to make that clear too, because the book is not just about athlete stories. As you know, Andrew, there's so much in there about plant-based nutrition and recovery and nutrients, and dedicated chapters to macronutrients and all of that. And speaking of that, the common themes, they're quite interesting, actually. I'll start by the most interesting one, Andrew, for me, was that because I interviewed a lot of these people personally, sometimes even in person. sometimes multiple Olympic athletes in the same room that I'm talking to. And one of the things that I found was that they were not using sports supplements because they were afraid of failing drug tests. That really struck me because I come from the, I come from the bodybuilding world. I come from, huge amount of supplementation, for the sport that I grew up in. And so to hear that some of the best swimmers, soccer players, runners, cyclists in the world weren't using sports supplements was just really interesting. And so that's not everybody, of course, but that was something that I did find kind of intriguing. Of course, the Whole Foods theme is very, very common. The fact that people are basically getting the most mileage out of their calories, the most nutritional bang for their buck by the specific foods that they are choosing to consume. And that is a theme that runs throughout the book. That is the pre-workout fuel. That is the post-workout nutrition. That is the primary source of calories throughout the day for many of the athletes are whole foods because they know they're getting the highest amounts of vitamins, minerals, essential fats, antioxidants, phytonutrients, fiber, water, and that's what they need to perform at their very best. And so aside from that, what's also interesting is that every athlete's going to eat a little bit differently based on what their calorie needs are, what their sport is, what their goals are. And so, a 100-pound figure skater is going to eat a lot differently than a 225-pound power lifter, but both of them are able to calculate what their specific needs are, pick the best foods for their performance, including ones that help with digestion, including ones that help with focus, including ones that help with relaxation or conserving energy by not taking up so much energy to digest. And they have a kind of a purpose-driven nutrition plan based on what their interests are. And so there's a section in the book that's called like the day in the life routine, where we talk to dozens of people. There's about 25 different athletes there, and they share exactly what they eat throughout the day. What's for breakfast? What's before workout? What's after workout? What's for lunch? What's for dinner? It's really, really insightful because—
And what they do for their workout, by the way.
Yeah. And what they do for their workout and what they do for their recovery, what their recovery protocol is, because there's more to being healthy, happy, and fit than just eating the right foods and exercising. There's a lot of recovery, and that could be cryotherapy, ice, heat, alternating therapy, sports massage therapy, meditation. It could be, foam rolling. It could be all types of things, but these are important to consider. And especially coming from people who are some of the top performers in the world and in the plant-based movement. And so there are absolutely common themes throughout, but there's also the individual approaches to plant-based nutrition based on that person's specific sport and what their goals are is also really, really insightful. And there's so much variety. There's somebody that's going to resonate with you as a reader. There's some athlete you're going to connect with and say, that's, I'm a cyclist, or I'm also in my 50s, or I'm also in my 40s. That is the person that speaks to me. Their mindset, their approach, their dedication, what their goals are, what they had to overcome, what their calorie range is like, what their favorite foods are, maybe the region of the world they're in, and the types of foods available there. That's the person that's going to connect with me. And there's something absolutely for everybody.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So the biggest thing that was for me reading the book was I'm with you on the supplements thing. That was a surprise for me as well. Not because I don't think that the plant-based diet requires supplementation in order to be successful. It's just more that there's, in the athlete community, there seems to be, most people are taking a protein supplement or, a greens supplement or those sorts of things. And yeah, so I was curious. One of my questions that I wanted to ask was, what was the biggest surprise for you? I'm sure you both learned a lot writing this book. You probably can't really write a book without learning a lot, but what were the biggest, most important lessons that you learned writing the book, and also what was the most surprising thing that you learned?
I think for me, like kind of one of the major themes, and this was a surprise, was just how differently people do things. Like it's not like everyone's eating wildly different diets. Um, but like, you have people, I think Nick Squires, who's like the strongest man in California right now is his title. Robert, correct me if that's wrong. But he eats plenty of like the Beyond Meats and the fake meats and stuff like that. Um, and I just even didn't really like, I knew like athletes were involved with that kind of stuff, but I didn't know if like elite athletes actually made that part of their diet for any reason, to get the protein or just because they enjoy it. And so I would say like that, but then you've got people well, I guess I shouldn't go there yet, but like you've also got some people who are like really meticulous about all the calories, all the nutrients, like down to the calorie. They're eating something that is designed to be exactly what they need. And then you get someone like Dotsie Bausch, who Olympic medalist. She said she just kind of eats what she wants when she wants, doesn't think about it. Lets hunger just sort of guide her and trust her body to crave the foods that are going to help her the most. So for me, it was like, I guess even doing this for 12 years, I still had this thing in the back of my mind, and I've in the past few years begun to talk about it as something that like we that I think is a myth. But this idea that like you need to be careful eating a plant-based diet, or like you need to really plan carefully, especially if you want to be an athlete, because if you don't, not only aren't you going to perform well, but something bad might happen to you. It's just kind of what we're all, not all, but very many of us, including me, including Robert, and probably including you, Andrew, raised to believe that like if you don't have meat and you don't have dairy, you're in serious danger of missing key nutrients, and who knows what will happen if you don't have those things. So seeing how, so I guess the idea was like, you got to be careful. That's what I sort of thought. And doing this for so long, I'd started to sort of shake that belief and believe that was not true. But seeing all these different approaches, it made me start to think like, you don't have to be careful at all. Like this is the type of thing where when every ingredient that you're consuming, and again, we're talking about athletes who are mostly choosing whole foods. Like there might be some Beyond Meat and stuff like that in here, but there's very little people who are having just added sugar and candy bars and that kind of. I mean, just no one's having that. So like if you're not having those foods and everything you're putting into your body is a whole food or something that's designed to be a health food, and it's one that not just like a fake mass marketed health food, but like a real health food that smart athlete is choosing. It's kind of hard to go wrong. Like there aren't big mistakes you make. Now, like, you could talk about supplementing B12 and a couple other things, like which people are going to argue about, of course, but you don't need to be careful. Like you need to be careful if you eat junk food all the time. And if you go to McDonald's all the time, like that's who needs to be careful. And that's honestly the people who it's so common that people assume that's just the way to eat. And you don't have to be careful if you do that. So that was just a big surprise for me, just to see the variety that these people did, the way these athletes ate. Yeah, I mean, that was probably the big one for me. That was the big theme.
Yeah, awesome. That's one of the big things I've learned over the years too, and I'm glad you brought that up. Was that, yeah, people always talk about a well-planned vegan diet. You need to make sure that you're getting all the nutrients you need, and you make sure that you cover all your bases and all those sorts of things. And but they never talk about a well-planned standard diet to make sure that you get all your nutrition. And yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. And yeah, that's something that I really push a lot too. Yeah, we've talked a lot about the stories and the ideas that are shared by athletes and about yourselves as well. I wanted to talk a little bit more about, you mentioned already that there's a lot of evidence based sort of research and science in this book. So can you guys tell us a little bit about, from your point of view, well, I guess not from your point of view, from the evidence's and from science's point of view, why is it that a plant-based athlete might have a competitive advantage over other athletes?
Yeah, it's all about inflammation. It's all about reducing inflammation and improving recovery. And when you eat a diet that is anti-inflammatory rather than pro-inflammatory, and you load up on antioxidants, and you load up on whole foods, and you load up on foods that are packed with nitric oxide that are going to open up veins and get blood flow going and just help overall circulation and things like that, you just get better performance. That's the name of the game. And that's the number one theme in the book. I would say number two maybe is the longevity benefit. Maybe Matt might reverse those as far as like the two big themes in the book are reducing inflammation and having this extended longevity in your athletic career, which is absolutely evident by the success that Rip Esselstyn, Rich Roll, Scott Jurek, Fiona Oakes, Christine Vardaros, and others have experienced in their 50s, and who are still, I mean, Rip just set a world record at age like 59 or something. And those are just some of them. John Joseph's almost 60, and you go down the line and they're still competing in things like John, Ironman triathlons. So let's talk about the inflammation thing for a moment. So if we can focus on the foods that have the most nutrients per calorie, and also the most antioxidants and the least pro-inflammatory components to them, what you're getting is this perfect blend of anti-inflammatory foods in a low calorie and high nutrient yield package that allows for incredible energy for pre-workout, incredible nutrition and replenishing carbohydrates that are burned through exercise, electrolytes that are lost through sweat, water that is lost through sweat, and amino acids that are building blocks of protein to repair damaged muscle tissue from whole foods. And you load up on things like berries and leafy greens, the best antioxidant foods around based on their pigment and based on their properties and their qualities. You are on the road to fast recovery. You're also on the road for easy digestion. You're also on the road for energy conservation, because you're not using all this energy to digest these heavy processed or very, very calorie dense foods, largely animal protein and processed refined foods. And so there you have it. You're not, and you're also very likely not going to take on a lot of extra body fat too, because the calories you're consuming are being used as fuel. They're being used as repair material to repair and recover after exercise. And they're used to hit your calorie needs, what your calorie target is, what your goals are. Not eating a bunch of excess calories that are loaded with oils and loaded with flours and sugars and eggs, dairy, or meat protein. What you're getting is just a food that provides carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients, fiber, and water. And you get as many of those as possible. Inflammation goes down, energy goes up, recovery improves. And there's certain foods are like all-star foods, right? And this is a book for active people, not just athletes, but active people. So you are going to see things like turmeric and ginger and tart cherry juice and blueberries and walnuts and kale and foods like that are just better than a lot of other foods when it comes to helping with recovery and with reducing inflammation. And so those are highlighted in the book, including in a chapter dedicated to supplementation. I also want to mention one more thing, just to honor this aspect that, I talked about, some of the best athletes in the world don't use supplements, but some of the other best athletes in the world do use supplements. So I want to be clear, we're not anti-supplement or anything like that. But what we're saying is that when the diet is so clean, I'm not going to say perfect or ideal or any of these, any of these kind of descriptive words, but when the diet is just so healthy, you need fewer supplements because you're getting what you need from those particular foods. And that's why you combine certain foods to get better absorption of iron, with vitamin C and leafy greens and things like that. And you combine like a breakfast meal that could be oats, but also with berries and nuts. And so you have the omega-3 essential fats, you have high antioxidants, you have complex carbohydrate, long-lasting fuel from the oats, you have more total calories for, give you energy for a longer period. There's all these strategies. And so we talk about that. But I just want to make sure that there are some benefits from specific supplements or foods that are used as supplements. And so we want to make clear that that's for consideration in the book as well. But at the end of the day, Andrew, the idea is that if you get what is basically like Dr. Furman's Andy score, the aggregate nutrient density index, that the most nutrients per calorie, you are on a fast track to success. And that's really what we're trying to do here with this book, is help people feel their best, perform their best, and be their best. And a plant-based diet is really, really helpful in doing that.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, if you decide, if you want to go down the route of supplementation, a lot of people who are supplementing would take, a multivitamin and recovery booster, protein, pre-workout things, all of that. People just take everything. And I guess what you're saying is, if you're doing it this way, then you can be more targeted and more specific in how you want to supplement, and you can target certain areas that are really important to you, rather than just let's just cover everything with supplementation. And that probably goes to I guess Matt would be focused on that a little bit more with the complement supplement things that you do, Matt, where I know that you don't do you don't focus on everything like lots of people do. You don't need you're not trying to cover every nutritional base with supplements. You're just trying to be targeted and specific about what you do. So yeah, I really like that approach. And I don't supplement, but I'm also not an elite athlete anymore. So maybe if I was trying to get back to that level, then maybe I would be trying to look for a little edge with a little supplement here and there. I do take B12, I should say, but anyway. So
yeah, one thing to add there, Andrew, like you're right, our supplement company Complement is really all about like let's make it as minimalist as possible. And in fact, we created it because I didn't want to take a full multivitamin. I wanted to take just the stuff that I thought I needed, which really is just a handful of things, three to seven things, depending who you ask. And so I wanted to get all that in one place, not to have to combine 7 different bottles, for those things. So it's really sort of a very mindful approach to supplementation. But we don't really do sports supplements at Complement. We make a protein that some people use, but I personally don't take protein powder. And I think the point that's really cool is like a lot of these foods Robert's talking about, they basically replace the need for some sort of artificial, supplement version of it, like for a pre-workout or something that's going to reduce inflammation. Like beet juice or beet powder is a really, really great pre-workout supplement for an endurance athlete. And ginger, turmeric, tartary juice, like those are kind of a pre-recovery thing that if you're like into ultra running, people will take those ahead of time because they know that they're gonna quell the inflammation that happens as you start, hitting miles 30, 50, 70. So that's one of the really things, like that these foods, are so powerful that many of them basically are supplements. And I think there aren't a whole lot of other foods that are animal based anyway that we can say that for.
Yeah, for sure. One of my favorite things about this conversation so far is that we've been talking for quite a while now about being the diet for an athlete, and we really haven't really talked that much, if at all, maybe about protein yet. And for most people, that's the first question. Like, if you want to be an athlete, where are you going to get your protein? That's the first thing. And it's clear that from your point of view, it's not the first thing you think about. So yeah, I really appreciate that, because I think it's easy to get protein myself. You do talk about it a little bit in the book, as you must. So and I'm going to get crucified if I don't ask you about protein. So tell us your thoughts on protein from a plant-based athlete's point of view.
Yeah, well, I'll just try to be really brief here, because the chapter on protein I think is actually fascinating. You're right, we had to touch on it. It has to be part of the conversation. But Andrew, it's less and less of the conversation now. I mean, have you noticed over the last 5 years, 10 years, the protein thing, people get it now. People, in all walks of life, they get it. They realize that plants have all the protein you need. And it's more of just like their own, flavor preference or addiction to certain foods where they get their protein sources. But I think most people understand that, yes, you can be plant-based and get all the protein you need now. And so basically, here's the really short answer. And then Matt, share your thoughts too. But the short answer, Andrew, is that if you consume the necessary calories based on your body's needs, you'll get adequate protein just by default. If you're eating like the right amount of calories, like for me, if I need 3,000 calories a day based on my gender, age, height, weight, and activity level, then if I eat those 3,000 calories from any even just minor variety of food, I'm going to hit those targets easily. I'm going to easily get my requisite protein needs. It's not hard. In fact, most people consume 1, 2, 3 times more protein than they need. And many of those people are not even active, not even athletes. They're just consuming copious amounts of protein that their body's not going to be able to even utilize anyway. So protein is just not something that's as high on people's radar anymore because they realize that, yeah, most of us get more than we need. And plant-based diet is certainly sufficient in protein.
Yeah, and like, so in the early days for me, like I had the same thing. In fact, that was one of my big hangups before I went vegetarian and then later vegan, was the protein thing, like it was for a lot of people back then.
And me too.
Yeah, right. So I mean, I spent a few years doing all the things that I thought I should do. Like I made sure I had something that I considered high protein in every meal, just so that I didn't start eating just pasta or something that I thought was back then was the carbohydrate food. But actually, if you look at pasta, like whole grain pasta, it's like 50% protein, which is when people talk about macro ratios, a lot of people want 15 as their protein ratio. So like even the food that we think of as the carbohydrate food is, like Robert said, if you just eat food, it's gonna, as long as it's whole food, it's gonna give you the protein you need. Now, if you eat tons of oil and tons of sugar and processed stuff, then I guess it's possible you could end up on the low side of protein. But so I don't know. I guess like that strategy worked then. I think that's the place for protein supplements. Like it's for someone who's new. If taking a protein supplement is going to give you the confidence that you need psychologically to, maybe even placebo effect, feel better, so that when your coworkers are telling you you're not going to possibly get enough, it doesn't ruin your day and make you, question the diet. It can be kind of a useful crutch like that. Possibly older people, older athletes might benefit from a little bit more, but again, you can get that from focusing on food. You don't have to supplement with it. So yeah, I mean, like the requirements, I don't know, you guys use kilos in Australia, I'm guessing, not pounds. Is that right? Yeah, I should know that. But in the US anyway, like it's 0.36 grams per pound per day, which may not make any sense to someone listening who's in different units.
Pounds about half a kilo. So
yeah, and we mentioned in the book, basically for athletes, 1.2 to 2.0 grams of protein per per kilo. There you go. Per kilogram. Yeah.
And so, and it's not a high amount. And so that 0.36 is for a general population. For athletes, you need slightly higher. It's also thought that vegetarian, vegan proteins, they don't digest quite as efficiently as animal protein. So therefore you should get maybe 10% more if you eat a plant-based diet. But like we're talking about numbers that are completely easy to get from even from whole foods. Like it's really almost a non-factor. There's amino acids, there's certain ones that are harder to get than others. But if you eat a wide variety of foods, chances are you're not going to be deficient in any of them. So it's just, like Robert said, it's becoming much less of an issue. Certainly it still is when you go to a barbecue or you talk to anybody who just isn't part of this world. That's the first thing they're going to ask you. And unfortunately, the answer, you just don't need that much. It's easy. It's in everything. It's just never really satisfactory, which is, I think, is why we're still talking about this. And I think until we see people in large numbers, which they are beginning to eat this diet, even if it's just for certain meals here and there, which is one of the great benefits of all these fake meats that are on the market now. I think people are starting to get it. I think they're starting to realize that yes, you can get protein from plant foods, and I think eventually that question will go away. But I think we're still a few years from that.
Well, let me share this story real quick if I can, if you'll allow me this opportunity to share. Matt, you just made me think of something. You're right. You and I and others now, especially in the science community, have that perspective now that, we just don't need as much as you think. We don't need that much, or you don't need that much. And that's not satisfactory for a lot of people. But you know what, Matt, when I was a champion vegan bodybuilder, you know what my response was when people would ask me about, oh, how do you get enough protein? I said, I eat more than you do. I'm a vegan. I eat more protein than you do. And I'm bigger and I'm stronger. And I'm not talking to you, Matt. I'm saying people who would ask me, because I was eating hundreds of grams of protein a day back then, and I was doing it as a vegan. And yes, at that time I was consuming 5 protein drinks a day and, a bunch of burritos and all these Cliff Bars and all this stuff. But the fact is, perhaps that was a more satisfactory answer for people, because you're saying I can't do something, yet I'm doing it in a greater level than you are. When it comes to protein consumption, I was consuming more protein than basically anybody that I knew, except for professional bodybuilders. But now I'm on the side of the science and the evidence. And like Andrew mentioned, we have a number of studies in the book that talk about that kind of thing, that compare people on a plant-based diet to an omnivorous diet. Men in a young age group of like 19 to 34 looking to put on muscle, and they're training for 12 weeks or 8 weeks at a time. And they do their measurements and they check their strength gains and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, those on a plant-based diet did just as well as those on a, you know, a mixed protein diet of plants and animals and whey supplementation and all this stuff. And the same with women too. There's another great study that came out of Montreal, more about endurance athletes. But again, it showed again that the plant-based athletes performed at a higher level. So I'm like at a crossroads, Matt. And we're going to do a lot of these interviews, and it's hard to even decide what to talk about because I know, I mean, I just believe it. I believe it to be true from learning so much from Dr. T. Colin Campbell and from so many other heroes, Dr. Michael Clapper, people in our movement, that the science says we don't need that much protein. We just don't. We need 10 to 15% of our calories from protein. And that's the key, is to get the required calories that your body needs. And if you get the amount of calories that you need, you'll get the amount of protein that you need. But how do we package that in a conversation that's palatable for someone who's, especially maybe another athlete who says, no, you don't understand. I'm a weightlifter, I'm a power lifter, I'm an Ironman, you know, whatever it is. To hear that, and of course, that's what the real literature says. That's what the science and data suggests, that we don't need that much. So I guess I'm kind of open to thoughts about this, because I was on the completely other end. Before I'd say, no, I eat more protein than you do. You can't use that argument with me because it doesn't work. But now I'm saying I eat less than you, right? I'm saying, no, I'm 220 pounds. Look at me. I only need 90 to 100 grams a day. And people are like, no, that's not possible. You must be cheating. So what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I also think this is one of those things where, like, if, you know, maybe the truly best thing we could do for that person's health and everything, and for this movement ultimately, is convince people you don't need as much as you think. But that's a way harder fight than saying, look, Beyond Burger has just as much protein as the regular burger. Just eat that, you know? So I have the sense that, like, that's where we are still, and will be for a decade or more, you know, who knows? And it's good. That's a better place than we were before, when we had to say, well, look, tofu has protein, eat that, right? Like, now at least we've got this direct comparison. It's like, well, here's something and it's plant-based, and look, we read the protein and it's, you know, so I think that is the easier message, that is not as correct as what you're saying, that we just don't need that much. But I don't think people are going to buy that we don't need that much for a long time.
I think you're probably right. And I think we need to be aware of that too, with our messaging, even with our own book. I mean, yes, we base on evidence and science and what the data suggests, and we stand by that and we believe in that, but we're also trying to inspire people to adopt this lifestyle, because it's going to benefit them. It's going to benefit the animals. It's going to benefit the environment. It's going to benefit their family, their loved ones, if they can have a healthier and longer life. That I think you're right. We need to start comparing, like, you know what, just have a Beyond Burger, you know, have an Impossible Burger, or go get this, this burrito, but add beans and potatoes and tofu to it, that kind of thing. Just like we did with, like, look what Vega did, right? Vega came out of nowhere 15, 17 years ago and created this plant-based protein powder that went head to head with whey protein and casein protein, and then became the best-selling supplement period in I think there's like a store like Target. I mean, it was even outselling whey protein and stuff, years ago, because it went head to head and said, you know what, anything you can do, we can do vegan. Anything you can do, we can do, without animal protein, without this baggage or these byproducts that come with it. And you still get your protein. It's just coming from plants. And I think, even though you and I don't use powders these days, and we don't load up on all these extra high protein foods, like we're not eating seitan before bed just to reach our numbers and our macros, that still might be a more appropriate conversation for someone who's like, it's just like offering people vegan pizza right now. They're going to eat pizza. People are going to eat pizza no matter what. People are going to eat ice cream no matter what. They're going to eat meat. Give them a vegan version,
Yeah, I love it. And these Beyond Burgers and whatever else, those sorts of vegan versions of meat. So I think they're a great place for people to start. I would never argue that they're the healthiest way to eat, but yeah, they're a great way to change what you're eating without really changing what you're eating. It makes it easy, and yeah, so I think that's a really important step for a lot of people. And personally, I think you should aim to move past that to just eating whole foods and a simple whole plant-based diet. But hey, if these sorts of things help you make that transition, then I think that's fantastic. Now we're nearly out of time, but I do have a couple more things I want to ask you. First of all, You've got lots of great stories. So getting back to the athletes in the book now, which to me that's the big feature of the book, and you know, there's for me that I've got my own ideas about this question, but I want to hear it from you first. So what do you think is maybe the most sort of surprising stories that you've, or maybe probably nothing's going to be really surprising to you from an athletic success point of view, but from the point of view of the reader, who do you think which stories in there do you think are going to be the most surprising or most interesting, you know, that are going to be sort of left field kind of unexpected things?
Yeah, I love that because the stories are my favorite part of the book. I just can't help it. I love the stories, even though I've read them so many times. I'll tell you, I've got a few favorites. Josh LaJaunie, his story is absolutely incredible, incredibly moving. His achievement is unlike anything I've come across that I know of in any realm. Josh LaJaunie, I don't even want to give away what sport it's in. I want people to get excited and find this in the book. Incredible story. I find incredible inspiration from Robbie Ballinger. Robbie Ballinger's story, again, just really speaks to me. On a personal level, I think Fiona Oakes is as altruistic as it gets. Her drive and her determination and her passion and her purpose and what she does is so commendable. It's again incredibly moving. As far as surprising, I think people will be shocked. They know a little bit about Dotsie from the Game Changers, but you only know part of it, right? You don't know about her, you know, suicide attempts and her drug addiction and the fact that she didn't even start as an athlete until her mid-20s, which is unheard of as far as people who go on to win an Olympic medal. You know, and then a few of the big names, Rich Roll, Scott Jurek, they always, it speaks to me. And then some newcomers. I think people are going to really like Darcy Gaither's story, Caitlin Cook's story, Orla Walsh, who is incredibly popular right now. I think they're going to resonate with that. And I want to mention Andrew really quickly, because this was important to me and Matt. And we have to, you know, obviously we're both male authors. We really, really wanted to include a lot of amazing female plant-based athletes, which we did. I mean, that was a goal. I mean, they're often underappreciated, under-recognized, go under the radar, and aren't often included in a lot of big projects about plant-based athletes. And we have some amazing athletes in this book, from Julia Murray to Vanessa Espinoza, Jahina Malik, who's been vegan since birth and is a pro bodybuilder, Harriet Davis, Christine Vardaros, Caitlin Cook, Fiona Oakes, Sharon Feichman, who's on the professional tennis circuit playing at the French Open right now. The list goes on. Mary Schneider, Laura Klein, who's a world champion. I'm telling you, Andrew, the stories, man, that gets me too. And there are a bunch of other ones too that are just really, really inspiring, including a couple I'm not even going to mention right now that might even be the most surprising. A guy out of New York from the rough streets of New York City has a crazy story and has done so much in the plant-based movement. So yeah, definitely. If you're thinking about this book and how it's different than the No Meat Athlete books or my previous work, there's nothing like this. There's never been anything like this. Nothing this comprehensive, nothing that pulls the curtain back on the greatest plant-based athletes the world's ever known. And the stories themselves are absolutely make this worth the read.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on Josh LaJaunie. He's an incredible story. He's one of my favorites as well. I love that one. And I've got a couple of other ideas, but I want to hear from Matt first.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I think this is because I'm an endurance, or always was an endurance athlete, and like that's where I experienced the benefits firsthand. Kind of like how I always had in the back of my mind the thing about like, well, you know, you got to be careful, well-planned plant-based diet. I always had this uncertainty because I didn't experience it firsthand about a strength athlete. It's like, okay, I can imagine that plant-based diet works for endurance, right? We all know about Scott Jurek, a complete legend in the ultra running world. But like, you know, that's endurance, and it pays to be lighter there and be, you know, good strength to weight ratio and all that. And just like, it pays to have a diet that will sort of slim you down and without losing much strength. but what about the strength athlete? Not just bodybuilding like Robert. That is kind of a different category for me. But like I'm just thinking about like people, Olympic power lifters, strong men, strong women. I mentioned Nick Squires earlier. He's one that I particularly like. I mean, to me, the strongest man in California. That's just a crazy thing for a plant-based diet. It's just not what we associate. Not what anyone associates a plant-based diet with. We're still saddled kind of with that idea of that if you eat a vegan diet, you're going to be weak and you're going to be scrawny. But the exact opposite of that is what he is. And I just think that's what moves me. That's, I think, like from my perspective, that's what the movement kind of needs to really, really shake off that idea that you're going to be weak, you're going to be skinny if you're vegan. So for me, it's those.
Yeah, that was a big one for me. That was where I was going with it too, was that, to me, California is the home of strength. That's where it's at. And obviously these days it's all around the world, but strength training, bodybuilding, that sort of started in California. So to be the strongest man in California, that's a big deal to me. I find that really impressive. And the other ones that I really loved were, the CrossFitters that you've got in there. That's like notoriously a low carb paleo kind of ketogenic diet kind of community. So I loved seeing stories of people that are just killing it in CrossFit as plant-based athletes. So
including Australia's own James Newbury.
Yeah.
He's 4-time Australia's fittest man. This guy is ripped, and I follow him online and I've interacted with him through interviews. I mean, that's what I always wanted to be. I always, growing up as an endurance athlete and then getting into bodybuilding, man, I would have been an incredible CrossFit athlete back in the 90s. I would have been so good. And then I bodybuilding, then I hurt my back and all these things. And I've done some CrossFit and I rocked it when I did it, 5-10 years ago, because I have that endurance background, the strength background, and you put those together, and because I can still run, even at a pretty high body weight, I can still run pretty fast and for a long time. And so, yeah, I'm with you, Andrew, that, when I see like the Netherlands fittest man, Australia's fittest man, these guys are plant-based. And there were a couple of women too that I interviewed, but they didn't quite make it into the book. Another, I forget her name off the top of my head, but a great CrossFit female athlete who's plant-based, didn't quite make it into the book. And that's another thing, Andrew. Yep. A book can only be so long, right? Maybe we'll have to do part 2. There are so many other athletes that didn't make it into the book, just like they don't make it into the Game Changers, or they don't make it into, What the Hell with Their Forks Over Knives or other books. And that's just the nature of how this business works. But there are so many amazing athletes to be inspired by. And I'm glad, that Matt, those like Nick Squires and strength athletes, Cam Awesome and Corinne Sutton and others resonated with you. And you're right. Nick actually just set 3 or 4 California state records just last weekend, and he already owns some of those records. And he's won international competitions in, I think, in Ireland or somewhere. And he's just a great guy. And so I love being able to bring these, that both of us can bring these stories to light because, or bring them to life, because a lot of people don't know about these athletes.
Yeah.
Brendan Brazier, right? James Wilkes, he's the guy that made the Game Changers, he's in the book, these big names, but it's the people that you don't know. That's going to be what I think surprises readers. Like, wow, I'd never heard of this person and they're the best in the world in their sport. And now I'm going to follow them and learn more about them.
Yeah. And it was extra cool for me because obviously James Newbury, Australian, I'm from Australia, but the other CrossFitter guy that I like, Jeremy Reinders, from the Netherlands. I lived in the Netherlands for a few years, and so it's just a little personal connection that I've got there, and yeah, that was really cool as well. So, I think you probably you guys and people watching have gathered that I'm a big fan of this book. It's like nothing I've seen before. It's so good to. Glad you've got that copy there. Thank you. Yeah, so go out and get it, everyone, and yeah, it really is like nothing I've seen before. It's very educational. Educating through story is really important, and I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this, whether you're an athlete or not. I don't think you have to be an athlete to get a lot out of this book. There's a lot of inspirational stories, and yeah, congratulations on putting together a really good piece of work that, as you said earlier, it's going to keep driving the movement forward and opening this whole idea up to a whole new bunch of people that probably have never considered plant-based eating and veganism before, and I think that's really, that's you guys deserve to be commended for that. So yeah, thank you, and well done.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Cool. Thank you, Andrew.
No worries. Well, yeah, that's it then. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, people should go out and get the book. It's on Amazon and everywhere else that good books are sold, I assume.
Yeah, and Matt's got a special website for it.
Oh yeah, if you go to book.nomeatathlete.com, you can get a bunch of info, just a page we put together that looks like the book and has all the different endorsements from just tons of leaders in this movement, as well as like a pre-order offer that if you end up getting the book, actually not just through pre-orders, but through June 19th, bunch of bonuses that Robert and I put together that you'll also get that'll help you take everything in the Plant-Based Athlete even further. So check it out, book.nomeatathlete.com.
And lastly, for your audience, Andrew, if I may, we don't yet have the book available in Australia, but if enough people in your home country are excited about it and can start, asking for it and spreading the word, we'll very, very likely get a book deal in Australia sooner than later. I've had the best tours of my life as a professional, as a speaker, as an author, have been in Australia. And that's the absolute truth. I say it on many podcasts, but the best tours I've ever done have been in Australia. And let's get that book there. And I hope to see you next year in Australia on tour.
You know what? I'll shout out too. One of our very most active No Meat Athlete running groups over the years has been the Sydney group. So I would love to get over there one day to meet them. I've never been myself. But No Meat Athlete Sydney wasn't and still is an active, awesome group.
Okay, yeah, awesome. I agree. I think we need to, get on Amazon and request the book to be on Amazon in Australia, and yeah, find a way to get it. And you guys are obviously doing huge things in the US, and if we can expand that globally, then yeah, that's going to be fantastic. So yeah, well done to both of you guys. Thank you for joining us and sharing your story and your eternal wisdom, and all the best with the book.
All right. Thanks a lot, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate the opportunity to share today.
All right. Cheers.